Welcome to our first video lecture. Your first unit is concentrating on the cell structure. Now, the human body consists of several levels of structural organisation. It has the chemical level, which is at the lowest level, and it includes all atoms and molecules essential for maintaining life, and a cellular level. Now, molecules combine to form cells, and the cells are the basic structure and functional units that make up the body. There are many types, such as nerve cells, blood cells, and muscle cells. Now, each type of cell has its own specialised structure and function, but they all have the same general feature. The cell is surrounded by a cell membrane, which we're going to be looking at in more detail shortly. There are a number of components within that cell membrane that serve a particular function, and these structures are called organelles. So what a cell is made up of? It's made up of protoplasm. It's a slightly opaque colour-like jelly liquid, and it's 70% water plus organic and inorganic salts, carbohydrates, lipids, which is a fatty substance, then you have amino acids, which are obtained from proteins. So we're going to be looking at the cell membrane in more detail. It's a fine semi-permeable membrane which is made up of protein threads and lipids. It has two functions. It keeps the nucleus and the cytoplasm in the cell, but the other function is to let other substances like your fats and proteins out. Your cell membrane actually works as a filter between the fluid inside the cell and the tissue fluid surrounding it. Some substances can cross the membrane, but others are blocked. Substances go in and out of cells in different ways, and we're going to look at these ways. So we're going to start with diffusion. Now, diffusion is when the membrane has tiny holes or pores between it, proteins and lipids, through which small molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide can pass. Then we have osmosis. This is the process of transferring water across the membrane by osmotic pressure. This means that the concentration or pressure of a solution is greater on one side of the membrane, so that water will then pass through to that side until the concentration is equal on both sides. When both sides of the membrane have solutions of the same pressure, it's called isotonic pressure. Then we're going to look at dissolving. So fatty substances are too big to diffuse through the membrane's tiny pores, so they dissolve into the fatty or lipid part of the membrane. Active transport is when substances are too large to pass directly through the membrane, or they are not soluble in fat. A carrier substance in the cell membrane takes them from the outside to the inside. Glucose and amino acids are both transferred by active transport. It is known as active because this is when the energy is used. And then lastly, we have filtration. This is the movement of water and soluble substances across a membrane and caused by the difference in pressure either side. The force of the fluid's weight pushes against the surface, and the fluid is then moved through the membrane. This is called the hydrostatic pressure, which is the process responsible for the formation of urine in the kidneys. Waste products are filtered out of the blood into the kidneys tubules because of the difference in your hydrostatic pressure. So let's look at more detail then of the components of a cell. So we have your cell membrane, which is the outer lining that forms the barrier. You have your cytoplasm, which is a semi-fluid within the cell membrane that surrounds the organelles. You have your endoplasmic reticulum, which is a network of channels running through the cytoplasm. It performs many roles, including your intracellular transport and support. Ribosomes are attached to it, and it's here that most of the cell's enzyme activity will take place under the influence of your ribonucleic acid. Then we have cilia, which is tiny hair-like structures that protrude from the cell membrane. They aid movement and absorption. Mitochondria is a double-membraned organelle, also known as the powerhouse. It's responsible for producing the majority of the cell's ATP, which is the energy-carrying molecule, used to capture and store your energy. Then we have the nucleus, which means the central part. In a cell, the nucleus is the oval-shaped organelle that contains the chromosomes, which are your hereditary factors, and the fluid within the nuclear membrane is called your nucleoplasm. Your Golgi body is a structure looking similar to the stack of plates. Its functions include processing proteins and lipids, so your fats, and controlling the enzyme activity of the endoplasmic reticulum. Your lysosomes are single-membraned organelles that contains digestive enzymes. Your lysosomes break down metabolic substances, foreign particles, and worn-out cell parts. And then we have your ribosomes, which is an organelle in the cytoplasm that may attach to the endoplasmic reticulum. It contains your RNA and your proteins. Ribosomes are the site of protein synthesis. So we're now going to be looking at your mitosis. So we're looking at your cell growth and how cells reproduce. So cells grow in a number of processes called mitosis, where exact replicas of your chromosomes in parent cells are duplicated to form daughter cells. Cells reproduce sexually through meiosis, which is a process which produces genetic variation. So mitosis is a multiplication of cells. Mitosis is faster in children and slows down in later life. There are 4 main stages of mitosis, during which the cells actively divide and have one resting stage. So let's break it down. So your prophase, the centrosome divides into 2 centrals. These move away from each other, though they are still joined by the spindle-like threads of the centrosome. Towards the end of the prophase, the chromatin in the cell's nucleus shortens and thickens, and it forms into the visible pairs of rods called your chromosomes. Each chromosome consists of 2 chromatids, and they are joined by a centromere. The nucleus then dissolves. The metaphase is when the nuclear membrane of the nucleus disappears, and the chromosomes arrange themselves at the centre of the cell, each attached to the spindle by the centromere. By the end of the metaphase, each individual chromosome can be seen distinctively as 2 chromatids are starting to pull apart. Your anaphase is when the centrosome stretches as the centrals are drawn further apart. Your pairs of chromatids then divide, and identical halves of the pairs move to each end of the cell. At the end of the anaphase, the spindle threads of the centrals divide to form new centromeres, and the cell membrane begins to constrict into the centre. You have your telophase then, which is when a new nuclear membrane appears around each set of chromosomes. The spindle fibres will then disintegrate and the centrals replicate. The cell membranes continue to constrict until 2 cells are formed. These 2 daughter cells will be identical copies of the original single parent cell. Eventually, the daughter cell will also divide, and the whole process will continue throughout life. Your interphase is when the interval in the cell cycle between 2 cell divisions, when the individual chromosomes cannot be distinguished. This is the time when the DNA is replicated in the cell's nucleus. The cell carries out normal metabolic activities, and your nuclear protein is synthesized, and your cells increase in size. Now, your meiosis is the reproduction of cells that result in a gamete or sex cell. In the first stage of meiosis, the centromeres do not split, and so the whole chromosomes move to the opposite poles on the spindle. This results in daughter cells with half the number of chromosomes of the parent cell. So in humans, it's 23 chromosomes in the male sperm and 23 chromosomes in the female ovum. When a male sperm fuses with a female ovum, a zygote with 46 chromosomes is created. If the halving didn't occur, doubling of chromosome numbers would result in each new generation. The zygote will divide by mitosis, and the organism that results from the cell division is an embryo which develops into a fetus. So let's finish off then by looking at your cell's function. So what does a cell actually do? The human body is made up of cells which forms your organs, tissues and fluid. Blood, for example, is a liquid tissue made up of several types of cell. What a cell does is reproduced on a larger scale throughout the body and throughout human life. So we're going to be looking at the functions. Movement, which is when whole cells like blood cells can move, and part of the cells move by the cilia of ciliated cells, but they only move in one direction. Respiration is controlled absorption of oxygen that combines with nutrients. Sensitivity, cells are able to respond to stimuli. Growth, cells grow and repair themselves by making protein. Reproduction, excretion, so waste which might be harmful in the cell, such as urea or carbon dioxide, is removed. And metabolism, which is the chemical reactions that occur inside the cell. Join us for your next video lecture to look at your skin structure and tissues.